There are people who walk into a room and instantly sense what others cannot put into words, not because they possess any supernatural gift, but because their hearts have learnt the language of what hides beneath the surface. While everyone is laughing and chatting, they feel a chill creeping through the air. When someone shines too brightly, they sense a trembling behind that light, and they don't know why, they just know that something isn't real. That is the empath. An empath doesn't just feel, they see. They don't see with their eyes, but with the silence of the soul. Their intuition is like an invisible compass, quivering at the cracks others still worship as jewels. In the crowd that applauds, they are the only one unable to join the rhythm, because within that laughter they hear another echo, the echo of deceit. Before the narcissist's mask begins to slip, the empath has already felt it. Before the lie is exposed, they have seen the shadow move beneath the glitter, and though they cannot name it, their soul knows. A shadow hides behind the light, a shadow that trembles with fear, but cloaks itself in charm and confidence. To the world, the narcissist appears magnetic, powerful, alluring. But to the empath, they see the emptiness trembling behind that smile. It is both a gift and a burden. Because to see the truth before others do is not always a blessing sometimes. It is an invitation to solitude. And that is where the story begins. The journey of the empath, the one who sees with the eyes of the soul, who perceives the narcissist's shadow long before the world even realizes that darkness exists. An empath does not learn to see the shadow through books. They learn it through pain. The same sensitivity that once wounded them becomes their sixth sense, an inner vision that never turns off. They don't need proof or logic, because what they perceive does not come from the mind, but from the deepest place within the body, the place where one soul touches another. When a narcissist enters a room, it often seems to grow brighter. They arrive with a smile, with an addictive confidence, with a gaze that makes others feel chosen. Yet, amid that light, the empath senses a slight distortion in the air, an invisible tension, like a thin string vibrating between two worlds. They cannot explain it. They only know something doesn't align. To others, the narcissist's charm feels like magic. To the empath, it is a signal. They hear the tremor behind the smooth voice. They notice the pause between words, the offbeat pulse within perfect gestures. They see eyes that smile but lack the light of a soul, and their intuition whispers, something is trembling beneath. An empath's intuition does not strike like lightning. It arrives like a breeze across the skin. At first, it's only a flicker, a faint chill, a subtle unease. But as they listen more deeply, those signals merge into a clear picture. A soul hiding fear, an ego built like a fortress, and a shadow pretending to be light. Carl Jung once said, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed." When the empath meets the narcissist, that reaction is instant. But instead of harmony, it is the collision of two opposing energetic worlds. One expands to feel, the other contracts to control. That is why the empath is the first to sense the distortion in that field. To see the shadow does not mean they want to expose it. It is simply the natural response of a soul that has known darkness before. The empath has been rejected, betrayed, and hurt by those they trusted. Because they have walked through their own night, they recognize the signs of night in others. They do not seek evil, they simply cannot avoid feeling it. What others call emotion in them is a finely tuned radar. While others hear words, they hear the energy within those words. While others look at faces, they see what hides beneath expression. While others are persuaded by an image, they look through it and perceive the trembling essence underneath. What makes them extraordinary is this: they do not deny what they see, even when it isolates them. They need no logical reason to know something is false. Their body reacts, the heart races, the throat tightens, the energy in the room shifts. It isn't fear. It's warning, as if their soul remembers this type of darkness from a lifetime long ago. That gaze, their second sight, is not prophecy, but the power of deep presence. The empath is so present that they can feel what others suppress. They live in the layer of energy where repressed truths still leave traces. And that is why they become the mirror the narcissist fears most, the mirror that reflects what they refuse to see. When the empath stands before the narcissist, two levels of vision unfold. Their eyes see form, but their soul perceives structure. At that deeper level, they recognize that what the world calls confidence is actually refined defense. What the world praises as charisma is simply artificial light, the glow of a lamp designed to conceal the emptiness inside. This is where their gift becomes a burden. The clearer they see, the harder it becomes to blend into the crowd. While others are enchanted by the mask, they already see the crack. While others celebrate the light, they see the darkness creeping in. And part of them begins to understand this gift of sight is not for judgment, but preparation for a deeper journey, the realization that true light always walks hand in hand with true shadow. As Jung wrote, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. The empath was born for that, to look into darkness, not to condemn others, but to one day realize that they too carry a shadow in another form. There is a quiet tragedy in the empath soul. They always know before the world is ready to admit it. That knowing does not come from intelligence, but from deep connection. It is a primal instinct, as if they have an antenna tuned to frequencies others have forgotten to hear. But because they can hear these frequencies, they also hear what no one wants to. That is their curse, to see truth too soon, while it's still coated in the beautiful paint of illusion. While the crowd remains enchanted by the narcissist's brilliance, the empath feels their heart constrict. While others laugh, they notice the flicker in that person's eyes. When people praise their confidence, the empath hears the tremor in their breath. And when the world calls them a born leader, the empath senses a soul struggling not to shatter. Yet when they voice what they feel, no one believes them. People say they're too sensitive, too negative, jealous even. You're just imagining it. They hear again and again. So the empath learns silence. They swallow the truth, understanding the truth always comes to them too early, while the world always arrives too late. That silence becomes a means of survival. Speaking truth before its time doesn't just invite disbelief, it invites exile. They become the strange one, the judge, the overreactor. And nothing hurts more than carrying a genuine insight while pretending to know nothing, just to be accepted. Jung once wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But for the empath, that privilege comes late. Before they are allowed to be themselves, they must endure a long season of being misunderstood, isolated, and self-doubting. Knowing too soon means living in a space others haven't yet reached. They are like the first to see storm clouds, while everyone else still gazes at the blue sky. They cry out, "A storm is coming," and the world laughs. The more they try to fit in, the more alien they feel. When you sense falseness in what others call happiness, when you see fear in people's eyes that they refuse to admit, you start to feel as if you live between two worlds, one of illusion and one of truth. And no one wants to hear about the second one. So the empath learns to wear two faces, one polite, smiling, nodding when required, and another hidden within that still sees, still feels, still knows. They cannot turn that off, because it is not a skill. It is their nature. They are the seers, whether they want to be or not. But seeing early has a cost. They bear the weight of knowing before there's proof. They endure isolation when no one relates. And worst of all, they begin to doubt themselves, because in a world that glorifies what feels wrong to them, their inner truth becomes a burden. That early knowing is a double-edged blade. It is light, because it helps them recognize others' true nature before harm occurs. Yet it is darkness, because it forces them to live in constant tension between trusting themselves or trusting the world. Most choose the latter. They betray their own intuition for the comfort of belonging. But the price of belonging is disconnection from the soul. Deep down, they do not realize that every time they deny their intuition, a part of them dies. Their soul shrinks, silent, waiting to be trusted again. And when what they once felt finally reveals itself, when the mask falls, when the shadow emerges, They feel both relief and pain. Relief for being right, pain for having doubted themselves so long. In Jungian philosophy, this moment is called enantiodromia, when the opposite pole reverses. Out of doubt comes faith, out of solitude comes strength. Out of knowing too soon emerges knowing just in time. The empath realizes that what they once thought was a curse, sensitivity, solitude, silence, was actually the soul's alchemy. That early knowing was never meant to set them apart, but to mature them through awareness. Thus, the curse only remains a curse when they resist it. When they stop fighting their gift, the gift of feeling and seeing it turns into grace. Seeing early ceases to be a burden and becomes protection from deception. And strangely, once they begin to trust their intuition, they step into life with a new kind of confidence. Not the confidence of ego, but the confidence of the soul. The quiet knowing that even if the world cannot see it yet, the truth is already there. There is a peculiar moment only empaths understand. When their eyes meet a narcissist's, it is not two people looking at each other, it is two souls colliding. One uses light to control, the other uses light to understand. And within that seemingly harmless encounter, the empath senses a crack, a current slightly out of sync, a faint echo trembling through the silence of the room. Outwardly, the narcissist still dazzles. They smile, they speak, they enchant with the language the world worships, confidence, success, charisma. But the empath sees through that glow and perceives what no one wishes to see: a soul like a frozen lake, calm and glittering on the surface, yet beneath it lies an endless icy depth. Carl Jung once wrote, "The shadow is that hidden, repressed, and unfavorable part of the personality which the ego refuses to acknowledge. The shadow is precisely what the ego cannot bear to face." And in the narcissist, that shadow isn't merely buried, it has seized the controls. Where the world sees a powerful figure, the empath sees a child standing behind a mirror, trembling for fear of being unseen. They sense the fear of abandonment threaded through every confident sentence. In the boasting, they hear a bottomless thirst for validation. In the need to dominate, they recognize the obsession that says, "If I don't control, I will disappear." They hear the words, "I don't need anyone," and more clearly than anyone else, they feel the disguised cry for help. The empath does not arrive at this through logic. They listen on the frequency of the soul. In a room full of laughter, they discern another resonance, the resonance of fear. They recognize that the narcissist's shadow isn't a smudge on the surface, but a vortex of energy pulling everything inward to plug an inner void. What makes the narcissist dangerous is not cruelty, but emptiness. That emptiness cannot bear a penetrating gaze. Thus, when the empath truly sees them, the narcissist reacts like someone stripped of armor. The empath's eyes become a mirror, reflecting what they have spent a lifetime hiding. In that instant, the narcissist is afraid, and fear turns into attack. They try to hide inside their glow, inside praise, inside control. But the empath knows this isn't strength. It's a mask polished with the energy of those they draw in. The empath feels this deep in the body. The narcissist's light doesn't emanate from within. It is reflected off the people who still believe in them. And when the empath's gaze no longer believes, the mask begins to crack. Not because the empath says anything, but because they see. The empath's look is like an invisible blade, slicing through the persona and shining straight into the shadow the narcissist has tried to bury. Jung described the persona as the mask we wear to meet the world. In the narcissist, that mask has become skin. They no longer know what is real and what is performance. They believe their own role until they meet someone who cannot be enchanted. That someone is the empath. The empath sees both, the performed persona and the forgotten child behind it. And in that seeing, they recognize the greater tragedy. The narcissist is not evil in the old, simple sense. They are a soul severed from its own shadow for so long that it must survive by clinging to the illusion that it is the only light. The truth is this: they cannot endure reflection. For their shadow holds not only fear and guilt, but everything they once discarded: mercy, tenderness, truth. When the empath sees, all those shards are activated. Chaos follows. The narcissist either seeks to destroy the empath or to possess them to restore the illusion of control. The empath senses that spiral not with the eyes, but as a subtle constriction of energy. They feel themselves pulled into the role of healer, compelled to rescue, to comfort, to prove that love can change them. But deep down, they know you cannot save someone who refuses to see themselves. To see the narcissist's shadow is not merely to spot falseness. It is the moment the empath perceives the architecture of illusion power fused to fear. They understand that every manipulation is a desperate effort to conceal a void we all carry to different degrees. And with that understanding comes a deeper insight. The shadow they see in the narcissist is the same shadow they themselves are learning to face. Thus, when the empath looks at the narcissist, they do not only see the other's truth, they also see their own lesson, the part they have not forgiven in themselves, the part still seeking validation, the part still longing to be seen. That gaze, therefore, ceases to condemn, it illuminates. This is when the empath's gift begins to transmute into wisdom. They realize that the ability to see the shadow was not given to set them apart, but to teach them to live truthfully. It requires them to love without collusion, to perceive without judging, to understand without dissolving themselves. And here lies the sacred boundary between the awakened empath and the unawakened one. The unawakened empath sees the shadow and suffers. The awakened empath sees the shadow and recognizes it as an invitation to step deeper into the light of awareness. For the empath, the narcissist's shadow becomes a mirror of the soul. In that mirror, they learn that true light never needs validation. It only needs honesty. And once they understand this, they cross a threshold of awareness. They no longer fear the shadow because they have seen the worst and still choose to love from a safe distance. Seeing the shadow does not make them bitter, it makes them calm. They know that the shadow only has power when we deny it. Once seen, it begins to dissolve. In the stillness of recognition, the empath no longer needs to prove, rescue, or explain. They simply see, and that is enough for the light to do the rest. After seeing, the empath cannot go back. The door of awareness has opened, and there is no pretending not to know. But early knowing is a profound solitude. No one warns them that seeing truth doesn't equal being understood. It marks the beginning of a long winter, the winter of the soul. For when they see the world's veneer, familiar faces grow strange, old laughter turns cold, and what once seemed sacred reveals itself as paint. They tell no one what they see, because speaking would be useless. Those not ready will resist the truth, and the one whose darkness they have seen the narcissist will weaponize it. Soon the narratives flip. The empath is called crazy, paranoid, too sensitive. A new story is staged where the narcissist is the victim and the empath the troublemaker. The world seems to turn its back, and precisely there the empath learns a vital lesson. Truth does not require a crowd, only a soul brave enough to stand alone. Jung wrote, "No tree can grow to heaven unless its roots reach down to hell." This is the season the empath now enters the descent into the underworld of awareness. Solitude becomes not merely a state, but a rite of purification. No one can accompany them here. Only when stripped of the noise can they hear the call of their own soul. In that quiet, everything begins to change. They no longer react as before. They observe instead of arguing. They stop trying to prove they are right, recognizing that those not ready cannot hear truth. They allow the world its illusions, having learned the cost of shattering them too soon. Their silence is no longer weakness, but a form of compassion, the kind that no longer seeks to fix others, only to keep one's own soul clean. Knowledge now becomes a test. Seeing what others cannot yet see means you must live on a different timeline. You are in autumn while the world is still in spring. You see the leaves falling, but others are still drunk on blossoms. And if you tell them winter is coming, they will laugh. Yet winter comes all the same. And when it does, they seek out you, the one they once called crazy. The empath learns the patience of time. No need to argue, only to stand firm in the truth. The farther the outer world drifts, the wider the inner world becomes. They begin to feel themselves with a depth they have never known. Layers of emotion once occupied by others return to them. Old wounds surface, but this time they do not run. They sit with the pain, look it in the eye, and realize the same empathy that once made them vulnerable now becomes the path back to essence. They no longer read others to understand them, but to understand themselves, why they are drawn in, why they want to rescue, why they see. In that long night, the empath begins to understand that seeing another's shadow is only the first step. The real step is seeing their own. That shadow is the part they once rejected: anger, pride, the need to be loved, the fear of abandonment. They recognize that the narcissist is a mirror reflecting the parts they themselves have not accepted. And when they embrace those parts, something miraculous happens. Their seeing changes. The shadow outside no longer frightens them. They no longer look at the narcissist with anger or pity, but with a deep understanding that everyone carries a dark face longing to be seen. They understand that what traps the narcissist is not having a shadow, but denying it. And so the empath learns to live differently, not in denial, not in attachment. They stand between light and darkness, like a keeper at the doorway between worlds. Solitude is no longer an enemy, but a teacher. In silence, they find a strength the narcissist will never have, the strength of not needing to be seen. Only when no one understands them do they truly understand themselves. Only when no one believes in them do they finally trust their own intuition. And in that separation, they are reborn not loudly, not gloriously, but deeply and truly. This is the stage Jung called the night sea journey, the passage across a dark ocean where the soul moves from chaos to wisdom. Each step in the dark is a prayer. Each loneliness is a baptism. The empath no longer flees silence. They learn to breathe with it. They understand that only in silence can truth speak. And then one day, in the stillness that seemed endless, they realize something. They no longer need to see because they have become the seeing. There is no gap between observer and observed. Light no longer comes from outside. It radiates from within. It is this gaze, quiet yet luminous, that makes the darkness dissolve without a fight. This is the reward for those who dare to look. The price of solitude is freedom. When no one walks beside you, you discover your soul is vast enough to hold the world. When no one believes you, you learn the only belief you need is faith in the light within. And when there is nothing left to prove, you become living evidence of what you spent a lifetime seeking. That truth does not need applause, it only needs to be lived. Then one day the inevitable happens. The world begins to see what the empath has long known. Not through an explosion, not through a confession, but through hairline fractures, quiet details that can no longer be concealed. The once assured voice now quivers. The once bright gaze drifts. Those who once admired begin to hesitate. Everything unfolds slowly, as if time itself were returning justice to awareness. And the empath, the one pushed to the margins, stands within this shift without gloating, without anger, with only a deep feeling truth always finds its way. They need not say, "I told you so." They have outgrown the need to be believed. Watching the mask fall is merely the confirmation of an old knowing. No illusion can defeat time. In that moment, they understand that what matters is not who was right, but who preserved their peace while waiting for truth to speak for itself. The empath has learned the art of patience, a power the narcissist will never possess. The shadow they once saw now stands visible to all. Lies begin to collide. Stories no longer align. Artificial light shows its burn marks. And what once made the narcissist's seductive confidence, manipulation, allure, now becomes evidence against them. A world that once worshipped turns away. The empath witnesses this not with revenge, but with mercy, for they know there is no pain like being betrayed by your own image. In this reversal, the empath feels something difficult to name, a touch of relief, because truth is finally seen, but also a quiet sadness, knowing every remnant must pay its price. They no longer want to win. They want closure. Because now they understand. True victory is not found in someone else's collapse, but in no longer needing to prove anything at all. This moment also marks a deep inner transformation. The empath who has lived in the world of perception now understands that seeing is no longer enough. They must embody the truth they have seen. From observer, they become bearer of light. Truth no longer resides in their gaze, but in how they live. Simple, straightforward, without pretense, without playing roles, unmoved by others' reactions. They become the embodiment of what Jung called the self, the center of the soul, where light and shadow are reconciled. The paradox is that when the world finally believes them, they no longer need that belief. The thirst for validation, the very thing that once hurt them, has evaporated. Through the long days of solitude, they have learned a single truth. The real do not require certification. They exist by the strength of their own awareness. Now they begin to see clearly the energetic architecture that once trapped them. The game of attention, of control, of praise and blame, of scapegoating, and they no longer participate. When others try to drag them into arguments, they smile. When smeared, they are silent. When praised, they remain still, not out of indifference, but because they know that every outer ripple is only wind, while their roots now reach deep into the soil of truth. The reversal unfolds not only outside, but within. Their energy changes. The sensitivity that once left them exposed becomes a radar for awareness. They no longer absorb others' energy, because they have learned to filter it through the light of discernment, the sacred distinction between compassion and collusion. When they feel another's pain, they do not rush to rescue. They first observe whether the pain is real or merely a tool of control. This is the soul's maturity when compassion and wisdom begin to move as one. Meanwhile, the narcissist falls into the void they always feared. Silence. No more reflections. No more audience. No one left to blame. They whirl within the same emptiness they once denied. And thus what the empath once sensed becomes an evident reality. They see the one who wore the mask of power now tremble before their own reflection. But the empath does not laugh. They bow their heads slightly, understanding that darkness too teaches. In Jungian thought, this is enantiodromia, the turning of opposites. Light and darkness trade places. The one once labeled too sensitive is now the clearest sighted. The one who believed they controlled everything is now controlled by their own shadow. The invisible order of the universe rebalances itself. No intervention needed. No revenge required. Everything returns to its rightful place. The empath emerges from silence changed. They do not seek justice. They are justice. Without a word, their presence clarifies things. When they enter a room, falseness loses weight, not because they criticize, but because they vibrate at a frequency that cannot be faked. And there, where truth is lived rather than spoken, the empath understands this. They were never born to expose others' darkness. They were born to illumine their own shadow, and by doing so, they illumine the world. When they stop trying to prove, they become the proof. When they stop seeking to be seen, they become the mirror. That is the true turning point. No longer a story between them and the narcissist, but between them and their own soul. They no longer fight to be believed. They live to demonstrate that light needs no crowd, only existence. And at the end of the journey, they do not say, I have seen the shadow. They say, I have passed through it and I remain the light. Freedom does not arrive the moment they walk away from the narcissist. It arrives when they no longer need to see the narcissist at all. When the light within grows large enough, they no longer need the darkness to define who they are. They stop observing, stop analyzing, stop asking, why are they like this? They simply know and then let it dissolve. True freedom begins when truth no longer needs its opposite to be reflected. The empath once carried the burden of awareness, the weight of seeing too much. Now they learn the art of not looking, not because they are turning away from reality, but because they have become one with it. They no longer need to reflect someone else's shadow to feel bright. They are the light itself. From observer, they become presence. From sufferer, they become creator. And from one once haunted by darkness, they become the bringer of dawn. There is a different kind of stillness in them now, not the silence of exhaustion, but the calm of understanding. They are no longer moved by the false displays of strength, empty confidence, manipulative words, the condescending gaze. They have realized that any power not rooted in love is merely a shell waiting to crack. They no longer seek to protect themselves from the narcissist. They simply no longer exist on the same frequency. That is when their energy transforms completely. Instead of reacting, they absorb truth. Instead of fighting darkness, they let it dissolve in the light of awareness. They do not forgive in the conventional sense, for there is nothing left to forgive. They understand that every soul walks its own labyrinth of forgetfulness, and the narcissist is merely an extreme expression of separation. They no longer see an enemy, but a mirror the universe used to teach them about the nature of light. And so they return to themselves, not as the empath who once suffered, but as one who has awakened. The sensitivity that once trapped them in cycles of pain has become refined strength. They feel the energy of others, yet do not carry it inside. They know the boundary between compassion and self-betrayal. They know when to open, when to hold back, when to stay silent, and when to leave. This freedom is quiet. It does not arrive with a cry of victory, but with the deep breath of someone who has survived their own darkness. The empath frees themselves not by defeating the narcissist, but by no longer needing the fight. They do not live to prove anything, they live as the proof. Within them, the battle between light and shadow ends. Only balance remains. Jung called this state individuation the union of opposites within. The empath is no longer a victim of emotion, but a master of energy. They see that the darkness which once haunted them was part of the soul's alchemy. Without darkness, their light would have remained naive. Now it is wisdom, not the light of one who has never fallen, but of one who descended and returned carrying fire. In this liberation, they become different. They no longer speak of narcissists with bitterness, but with insight. They no longer recount their pain as wounds, but as a creation myth. They no longer tremble when they remember. They smile. They do not need to retell their story to be understood, for they are the story, transmuted into light. This freedom has the form of a person who walks through crowds without hiding their heart. They see everything, yet are not pulled in. They hear every word, yet respond only on the frequency of the soul. They love without binding. They give without losing. They leave without hate. And in every step they carry the stillness of one who has seen through the illusion of the world and still chooses to love it. The empath's freedom lies not in banishing darkness, but in no longer fearing it. They understand that the shadow never disappears. It simply loses control when seen through the eyes of consciousness. Thus they become guardians of balance between two worlds, between what is seen and what we are not yet brave enough to see. No longer seeking the narcissist to heal, they become their own healer. No longer needing to prove worth, they are the source of worth. No longer fearing pain, they know that every wound now serves as a doorway into the deeper chambers of the soul. And at the end of the journey, they understand true love is not something to give or receive. It is the natural essence of presence itself. This is sovereign empathy, empathy with sovereignty, a compassion free of attachment, a light that knows its boundaries yet still shines, a soft strength that cannot be manipulated. The empath is no longer a victim of the emotional world, but its weaver. When they pass through someone's life, they leave not the trace of suffering, but of awakening. They are no longer the mirror for others to gaze into, but the sun that makes darkness retreat. And the world, in rare moments, seems to pause, as if recognizing that true light never needs to prove itself. It only needs to live. And the empath smiles gently, like one who has just remembered an ancient dream. No more questions to answer, no more shadows to flee. Only a deep knowing that everything which once caused their pain was the very road leading them home. The light they carry is no longer a lamp held for others. It is the sacred fire of the soul, untouchable, unstealable, beyond praise. And from that moment on, they are no longer merely the empath. They are the one who sees and the one who is free.